Okay, so I was sight reading something over on my sight reading channel. The first Noel, and in this book I was reading out of, it happened to have this accompaniment. Right, and made me want to kind of stop for a second from my sight reading and mention this. This is kind of great. This is the go-to pattern that I mention for people. Um, for so many things. Okay, people learn their scales and their arpeggios in every key, and that's where they stop. They don't practice anything else in every key, and classically trained pianists anyway. And that's kind of a mistake because yes, you run into arpeggios a lot, not always the way that you would practice them as a technical exercise. You run into scales as a building block, but it's really uncommon that you actually run into a scale fingered as the scale straight up and down in an octave, or especially 2 or 3 octaves. That almost never happens. Um, you run into actual, melodic figures or accompanimental figures, and this is a great example. That's an easy access point for people to start practicing ideas in every key. Because when I tell people to play something and practice something in every key, it melts their brains because they can't imagine taking anything and transposing it to new keys. And it's really not bad here because for this, you just have the 1, the 5, and the 3, or you can think of it as the 1, the 5, and the 10 because you're reaching the 3rd at the 10th, right? And it's just not that hard. Now, that at first, you're going to have to think about it because maybe you play your scales and your arpeggios just as like a finger memory exercise, which you're not getting a lot out of that. You need to be spelling. But once you can spell these, it's just the 1, the 5, and the 3. So that's a pretty easy thing for most people to spell quickly. And then you can just work something like this around the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths. And it sounds pretty pleasant by itself anyway, but this is just a super practical thing. Now you can apply this to all kinds of other stuff. This one will actually be practical for like reading, especially a lot of accompaniments, but you can apply this to anything. I could take even this melody. That's just a scale, but it's got this melodic contour to it. You can take that and figure out how to transpose that too, because that first little opening bit of this song, it's just 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that's not the fingers. It happens to be the fingers in this case, but it's also it's also the scale degrees, and that's how I tend to think of it when I'm transposing. But that means you can put it in any key because you're like, okay, I want to play it up a fourth in F. So what's the 3rd in F? Oh, it's A. So you start there and B. And you can just go around. Now, that one's an easy enough pattern that you don't really need to change fingering for anything. But, as you move around keys, you do end up having to solve problems where there's different combinations of black and white keys that force you to sort of solve different fingering contingency situations. And that's really how you round out your technical ability so that you can do this stuff in any key if it shows up. And like when I was reading this morning, I didn't have to think about the left hand because I knew what was happening. It's a pattern that my hand is very comfortable with, so I'm not struggling thinking about, oh, how big is this distance? I've played this a million times in all the keys. It's not a problem. The other thing that's so useful about this is for reading out off of lead sheets. So if you had like a lead sheet with Amazing Grace, people ask about this a lot. They're like, how do you get good at this? Because I just have these really boring, I'm just playing these block chords. Actually, just by reflex, I added an inversion there, which a lot of people wouldn't do. They just jump between these block chords. But you can apply that. Right? So you can apply that to a ton of things. Granted, I'm playing the pattern in 3 and that song's in 3, you can apply it to a pattern in 4. It's fine. But this is just really useful and really versatile. You can make accompaniments sound better out of lead sheets when you're just basically improvising the accompaniment. And also, it'll just round out your technique. And if you can do this and transpose this into every key, it starts to open doors so that you can transpose other ideas into other keys, and that will end up helping with both your lead sheet reading, your improvisation, and just technical roundedness for reading and playing actual, note for note music off of the sheet. All right. Hopefully that's helpful to somebody.